And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the Monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible.
Fuck, we have no booze.
There's always booze here. There's always booze here. You talking about?
Maybe you have it. I don't.
Let me go get my bottle of whiskey.
And for whatever reason, OBS is fucking up because it's not showing the oh, there it is. Now we're finally seeing the Discord icons.
Woot!
Oh, because OBS is being dumb.
Not dumb, just slow.
OBS.
Yeah,
I can.
I'll go
being
with
OBS.
What now?
And of course, while Shades and Kay are out of booze, Rick is over in the chat drinking hard root beer to rub in the salt.
And I'm of course drinking honey liquor.
Mm-hmm.
I have water.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Monk and I with the whole giant Vikings drinking honey liquor thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Anyway, introductions.
Yeah. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good brothers and good sisters. We have the third Aaron in sports ball, the man who could probably manage the Cubs better than Madden, and the man who is currently enjoying the salt of Tom Grossi. Good brother Aaron.
Choke! Pack! Choke!
We have the man of 1,000 magical girls, good brother Cure. And we have the lady of the 1,000-page book, which is probably aiming for your heads.
God damn it.
Making her GeekWatch debut, good sister Lady K.
Good evening, and thank you for the invite.
We have the man who is taking over all of your anime and your VTubers under a pair of cheap sunglasses. Good brother Shades.
Hello.
And we have the man of 1,000 runes, the man who is too metal, and the CEO of Zadaria Enterprises, bringing your brain up to 10,000%. Good brother Xanatrix.
These authors need 10,000%. Maybe I'll sell them a set of Zadari specs.
That's right.
Yeah, assuming they got any brains.
That's right, folks.
It's true.
Because
multiply anything by 0, it's still 0.
That's right, folks. Because we are 10 times better. Because our company's Zadari specs are 10 times better than that of Guy's.
That asshole.
And this week, this is one of those cases of I called an audible before it even started. A negative audible, if you will. So the original topic for this week was going to be called Rowling Syndrome. And it was going to be based on authors who can't leave well enough alone, who always have to add some extra context after the book or film or whatever is out. I could have also called it Lucas Syndrome, but that would be low-hanging fruit.
Not to mention, Lucas actually eventually learned from his mistakes and sold it off before he could fuck it up further.
Only for someone else to fuck it up instead.
Yeah, I bet Lucas feels lucky to have dodged that bullet.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on.
But after a few days, I began to realize that's a little bit of a small net to cast. And one of these days, I will stop making fishing references with my lexicon, but in my defense, everybody loses their shit around here during the fishing opener. And even if it's a different kind of fishing, Shades, I'm pretty sure you can relate to the whole thing of people losing their mind over fishing.
Considering my stepdad enjoys a good fishing trip, yeah.
Just at least you've never had to handle leeches.
Nope. Avoided that one.
Yeah, that's one of the two main baits around here: leeches and night crawlers. I don't mind night crawlers; they're just giant worms. The problem with leeches is that it's hard to pick the thing up.
Yeah, because it'll start. Because also it'll start attaching yourself to you, and ooh,
It's not a,
let's just say
it's not the attaching part that's the problem. It's the fact that they decide to start thinning out and swim away.
oh,
So you think you got it, then it just slithers off. But when it comes to the images that you're all seeing on screen, some of you might be raising an eyebrow with a couple of them going. If we're talking about cardinal sins of storytelling, why am I bringing up George Martin and Robert Jordan?
flame shields up, please.
Well, here's the thing. I wanted to show that even with good writers and bad writers, no one is free from sin. And no, I'm not using that as a segue to do my own version of Cinema Sins, because fuck Cinema Sins.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, we're saying even the best writers have their off days.
Yes.
Yeah, this isn't. We are not a pretentious monissery, or
No.
should I say, a pretentious
Oh, hey, and
brotherhood. Or
hey, we've
Look
got
who's
our
late
latent
and
gay
as
friend.
usual.
The Doku challenge continues, ladies and gentlemen.
And of course.
And just so you guys know, if I end up cutting out, I've been having issues with Discord the past couple of days. So,
Oh, you too,
Yeah.
huh?
Fair enough.
Oh,
It happens.
God.
Yeah. So, I guess the first one that we can start with is the thing that kind of capped this thing off. See, a few months back, this whole thing started with me when the Wachowskis, a pair of creators that I used to respect until
Oh God.
up until Cloud Atlas came along.
You know what? Hold on. Let me load my shit up.
Oh, fuck.
Oh,
Yeah, drink for fucking Wachowskis. What the hell? Yeah,
Oh, that
they
didn't
must have
take
taken
long.
Some crazy pills as of late.
Anyway.
And I've got a full bottle of whiskey right here.
They had decided to make this grand statement about. They made a couple grand statements about the Matrix that completely contradicted with earlier statements, and even with the films themselves, especially the first one. You know, the good one. The first was that it was an anti-capitalist movie, which is odd because commerce doesn't even play a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing to do with commerce or even allegories for commerce there.
Mm-hmm. The second one, and this was the one that really raised my eyebrow, was their claim that it was always, and I'm slightly paraphrasing what they said, that it was always an allegory for being trans.
This
Yeah.
contradicts
Yeah,
their
bruh.
yeah.
Now,
This contradicts many earlier statements they made about it being a Jesus allegory, including
What?
as a yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
no,
they
Lady
did
K just broke. Lady K just broke. It's a delayed reaction.
Yeah, understandable there. Now, look, we get that one of the Wachowskis is trans, and we got nothing. I got personally, I got nothing.
They both are.
Oh, both are. Okay, well, fuck it. Well, still, personally speaking, I got nothing against it. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever your body is, whatever. I don't give a shit. The thing is that when you start making statements like that, when everything prior to that contradicts said statement, yeah, quite frankly, no, you don't get away with that.
First
And
off, that's not how allegory works.
Yep.
Allegory is a one for one formula. This is the reason why when there's if you want an example of allegory, it's very obvious that X-Men is allegorical to the civil rights movement. What with it, I think several of the creators were pretty outright that Charles Xavier was meant to be analogous to Dr. King.
Makes sense.
But but again, it comes down to that whole one for one approach. And it goes further with something like Genosha being an allegory for apartheid era South Africa.
Yep. There's also the fact that at one point the Wachowskis, in a couple of interviews, and also in the highly entertaining ending of the Matrix video game, The Path of Neo, directly stated that the entire trilogy is an allegory for Jesus, because Neo sacrifices himself to save humanity. And it was pretty obvious to anybody who paid attention.
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry, that allegory. Like this.
But then they also, but the entire reason they popped into the game to say that was another audible was pulled about the ending of the game. They're like, you dying at the end of the game wouldn't be fun for the player. So now you're just going to fight a giant Agent Smith made out of a bunch of smaller Agent Smiths and rubble. Oh, and a pair of sunglasses found on a billboard. That ending was ridiculous, but I understand why they did it. You had to have a final boss battle.
Yeah,
makes
kind
sense.
of necessary there. So yeah, but at least they acknowledge that we couldn't recreate the ending of the movie in this game because again there'd be nothing for you to do. You just sit and watch a cutscene and you'd be dead. But that's not fun.
They did. Yeah, they do this shit now though, where you. But back then, there would be furniture moving.
Yeah, but the point we're trying to make is that calling this saying this has anything to do with being trans, where in any of the movies does that allegory make any sense?
It's called the current year clap shades.
The only spot where it really applies is, I believe, one character in the first film who I believe it was Switch, who was different genders in the real world and in the Matrix.
Oh, you mean the character that was hardly there and then was there just to get killed off halfway in?
By saying not like this.
Exactly.
No, the other, and this is a stretch. I'm going to acknowledge right now that what I'm about to say would be a stretch. The other way you could even remotely shoehorn in, or otherwise edge in an allegory for being transgendered is the fact that Neo is not Neo. He's Tom. Tom has to die to become Neo. Just like when a person transitions, they leave behind who they once were. Again, very, very big stretch, because that type of allegory can be used for multiple different things other than transgenderism, including, again, the whole Jesus complex.
Here's the problem with the Wachowskis don't even realize that whole aspect wasn't even in the first version. That's the problem. You got with some of these guys, especially the ones that decided to chase the current year clap. It seems like they like to change their bullshit just to fit fit bullshit trends.
That's actually the elephant in the room I wanted to address.
That pissed me off. Go ahead, Doku. I know you can describe this a lot better than I can.
So it's very frustrating, whether it's J.K. Rowling doing it, whether it's the Wachowskis doing it. But when you already have an established story, you already have established the tone of it, you've already established characters, going back and trying to retcon or suggest that there is a deeper allegory, even though if there was, you were too lazy to make it clear, or just completely injecting whatever is popular at the time in regards to trends, be it political, social, or otherwise, to try to keep your story relevant or to try to appease the cancel culture mob. Like, don't do that. Let it stand as is, or if you want to make like a side story or another character, like there are ways to do it without completely retconning what you've already established in a work that, like The Matrix, is already well out there and established. But that is frustrating.
What's frustrating to me as a reader and as a creator is an inability by some creators to let a story lay as it is, and this is where I do want to get into one thing that has been has been on the rise in discourse, and I'm pretty sure some of you have seen it a few times. I absolutely reject the notion of death of the author.
Ugh.
Oh God Almighty!
I'm going to have to counter you there just a little bit. Death of the
That's
author can apply in specific situations, but most of the time, yes, people incorrectly apply death.
Yeah,
of the author.
I've had Monk will tell you I have had a personal experience with someone who tried to use the death of an author argument in a completely wrong way.
That's the reason why I reject the notion is I find that the argument for death of the author is presented in bad faith. It's presented as a means to weasel in that somebody's particular headcanon is just as viable. When you look at a lot of people's approach to headcanon, it's usually a few sentence description that they might post on some sort of social media without thinking about the implications. This is why I have the saying, headcanons get the headcanon.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget one of the older memes on the internet. Lit professor. Well, when the author said that the walls of the character's room were blue, it was actually used to describe a deep-seated sadness and melancholy to his emotional state, as if his entire world were losing out to all colors but the blueness within. And then it says, the author, his walls were fucking blue.
Yeah, that is how this. And actually, I want to share with you, because Xana, I know you haven't heard this story yet. The experience I had dealt with someone who tried to play Death of an Author Omni.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Oh yeah, you definitely know where this is going. So, as an anime guy, I came across a video from an old, what I thought was an old friend of mine and a fellow AniTuber who reviewed the anime Persona 4 the animation. You know, the good one.
Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that guy?
Yeah,
that guy
yeah.
before?
Yep, this story.
Oh,
We're talking
boy!
Yeah. And in his review, he tried to argue that Kanji was supposed to be full-on gay, if not at least bi. Which, okay, there's a debate there in some regards, but not really. But the bigger one was the story arc with Naoto Shirogane.
Okay, I know where this is going.
All right, you know what, Xana? Let's play a little game. What do you think he did? What do you think he did with Naoto's story?
The thing that I constantly see with the people of current era and Naoto's story, the fact that it was a way of erasing trans identity, and Naoto was actually supposed to be trans all along.
Yep, nailed it.
Oh, freaking course!
And this reviewer specifically cited Death of an Author as his reasons for justifying this look at the story.
Mm-hmm.
He specifically called it out.
He called it out using Death of an Author, when Death of an Author, if properly used, according to the essay written by the Frenchman back in the 1960s, excuse me. I want to say the 1600s, but it feels like it was written in the 1600s. The way you use Death of an Author is usually to remove the author in order to look at the more subjective ideas of text as a way to explore what the subjective ideals could mean, because subjectivity is, in and of itself, an imprecise measure. But the words within both the game Persona 4, in the Japanese text and in the English text, and in the anime Persona 4 the animation, specifically state that that Kanji is not gay and Naoto is not trans, and that what is happening to Kanji is trying to come to the ideals of his idea of what it means to be manly and consign it and correlate it with what he does in his spare time, knitting and making.
Yeah, exactly.
Things.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But the bigger complaint with that argument was with Naoto's story, because It had absolutely 100% nothing to do with transgender in any conceivable way.
Yes,
The whole
her
point-
story,
Shoehorn.
Her story was about age, not gender.
not just age, but also because it is in Japanese society, the perception of women's competency versus men's competency.
Yeah. But the age was the bigger thing because she was being looked down on
For being
as
young.
a child,
Yeah.
for being a young detective.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter how good she was, they always saw her as a child until they needed her for a case. Hell, and her whole phantom story, her shadow story, was the fact that they wanted to artificially age her with the thing. The surgery was not for gender change. It was for age. And in fact, the shadow confirms this because it has a beam, in the anime at least, that turns everyone old.
Mhm.
If it was about trans, why wouldn't it be a gender swapping beam?
Which would be par for the course for Japan. Gender swap beams are in half animes everywhere.
Yeah, they don't need much of an excuse to use that. So why didn't they?
Mhm.
There's your answer. But that's slightly getting off the rail. But the point
Yeah.
is that death of an author is a bullshit argument 99.9% of the time.
And
It's only used to justify their own editorializing garbage.
that's the reason why I say it's used in bad faith, because the central idea of Death of an Author is that the author's stance is no better or worse than anyone else's. The problem is that so often when I see Death of the Author invoked, that is not applied evenly, because the person advancing the argument clearly sees their own interpretation as superior. And because of the fact that it has that opportunity, even if it can apply in very specific circumstances, that's the reason why I do not respect it, because when it's that easy to use it in bad faith. It's like that old line from it's kind of like that whole line from the Incredibles. When everyone's special, no one is. When anyone can put their particular argument on a pedestal using this, the argument has no weight.
That's why I prefer speculative interpretation to stay in the realm of speculation, and I have a lot of respect for authors that don't bend unless they explicitly want to explain something, like if there was a deeper meaning that they didn't want the reader to figure out for themselves.
Mhm.
They just don't answer the question, and it's like, view it how you want. I respect authors because a lot of them do buckle to the pressure after being asked the question for the millionth fucking time.
Yeah, and this is also why whenever I've had authors and creators and the like for interviews, anytime that they're doing a repeat thing, the thing that I tend to ask them is what the learning experience was like. What sort of things did you do that in hindsight didn't turn out how you initially intended? Because an artist is their own worst critic. And
Amen to that.
And I'm fairly certain we've all looked at our own writings or our own designs, and cringed at the thought of the fact that we thought that was a good idea at the time.
No, that never happens.
Never
at all.
happens.
Ever.
That's not something
No.
that ever happens, Monk.
Bullshit.
Never.
Oh,
It's not like I didn't just look at something I only wrote 2 months ago and thought, why the hell did I write this just yesterday? Never happens.
But when another example of this sort of superseding thing, and they tried to use a similar thing called the Thermian argument, which is equally bullshit, is when somebody tries to apply this to world building. A popular example of this is one that I have had to deal with for the better part of 8 years now. And anyone who's familiar with a level company called Games Workshop knows where this is going, with the question of why can't there be female space marines?
I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut on this one and let Mildred finish.
Even though even though there are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of books in the Black Library detailing why. The main reason is the gene seed that is used to create Space Marines to make them
It's from
the
the
post-human is from the Primarch, and is from their Primarch, and the stuff that was used to create the Primarch project came from the God Emperor of Mankind, who is not androgynous. He is a man.
Yeah.
He is a man.
This is not this is not the God as dualism. This is the emperor who will conquer the galaxy. And for those not familiar with what the Thermian argument is, it comes from one of the numpties, Dan Olson, about how
That jag.
certain elements in media are criticized for isms, for the general isms you hear everywhere. And that if a fan comes forward citing in-universe and reasons stated, so say there's slavery in a setting, and it's because this is a dark place, the different races in whatever setting you're in hate each other and enslave each other because that's how war works in that world. You know, someone says slavery bad, don't write that. Fans come forward and say, well, there's all of this political reasoning within the fictional world that is why slavery exists. And Dan, being the uptight, holier-than-thou asshole that he is, says, that defense isn't valid because stories can be eternally changed by creators. I believe his exact words were, stories are eternally mutable by creators.
Fuck him!
And that he says that the only reasons the story is written that way is because the writer wanted to make it that way, which the Thermian argument is then also a backhanded snipe, basically implying that whatever author wrote these things likes those things.
Oh,
Okay, hold on.
oh, we have now pissed off the lady.
Be
See?
careful.
I can piss off the monk and I can piss off the lady. I'm fucking magic!
No, you didn't piss her off. You didn't piss her off. You just spotted off the thing that spotted off the thing that pissed her off. Whoever made this fucking Thermian argument, they're the ones that pissed her off.
Dan Olson,
Yep.
also known as Foldable Human, also known
That-
as holier than thou asshat who needs to get the fuck off the internet.
Yeah, one day, man, that guy. I do not like fucking Dan Olson. One day, he better not cross my fat ass one day, because believe me, he's gonna get introduced to Mr. Baseball Bat to the fucking face. Stupid bastard. Anyway,
I better stop what I'm working on because I'm getting distracted.
but yeah, that is another. That's another. This is another one of those dumbass Dan Olson takes, basically saying, but obviously if he's writing about that, he actually likes that. So basically, you just called anyone who's written most people who's written a crime drama a rapist. What? Stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. As a writer myself, honey, what's the one genre I can't do?
I don't remember.
Horror.
Oh yeah.
I can't watch horror movies. I was extremely traumatized as a kid because of my dad and my pseudo uncle and shit like that.
Well, they binge watch Freddy Krueger movies or something?
Almost every night.
Oh.
Lots of nightmares on my end. Now, that's not to say I can't use it as a literary device, because Mildred, you remember a little bit of what Curse of the Robin song. One of the plot points is, right?
Mm-hmm.
The undead.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going with the Thermian argument, because I mentioned that I have a character that murders people, once in a crime of passion, for that matter. That he experiments on their flesh, both living and dead, and that let's see, what's another good one? He continuously tortures certain characters. Does that mean that I like that shit? Fuck no!
The
Not only
go ahead.
The implication, it comes from him saying that it's written that way because the writer wants to write it that way, and then uses that as a smug, which means you must like it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't want to write that way.
Gee, it's almost like we use uncomfortable things to inject conflict into our stories that most people would generally agree that.
Or explore trauma in a safe fashion, or any of the other reasons people use the darkness of life.
Exactly.
I was recently listening to a concept album by Dream Theater, mostly because it was on my playlist at the time. That album being Metropolis Part 2: Scenes from a Memory, which, by the way, is a really, really damn good album.
Dream Theater's a really, really damn good band, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, but I've had that, and I also have a playlist set aside for the 12-step saga. But the conceit with Scenes from a Memory is a man who is haunted by a murder that took place in 1920. What am I saying? It wasn't 1920, but the point is, it was decades ago.
Yeah,
and it gets into the whole idea of reincarnation, but it opens up with a scene of hypnotherapy, and there's been a lot of those sort of themes in a lot of Dream Theater's works of introspection, and to try and claim that it implies something about what they happen to like is not only a bad argument, but in the case of something like the 12-step saga, that's in really poor taste, because
that was all about Portnoy's journey through alcoholism.
Yeah, in fact, it unfortunately has been lost to the internet. But somebody did a remix called The 13th Crooked Step that compiled all 5 songs from the 12-step saga, and interlaced between them different interview snippets from himself, from other people like Lemmy, Jericho, and a dozen others, just going down the path that he had.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it from him, and it's a vast shift in tone from how high up he was at the start to where he was at his lowest until he finally got help.
Yeah,
because he had made no bones about it at the time that he was completely fucked up. Anytime that he wasn't on stage, he was drinking. That's how bad he was. And
where he got some of the darkest songs Dream Theaters has ever played.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, all the best songs are made under the influence of alcohol or drugs or any other weird.
A lot of writers do draw a lot of writers, and a lot of people who are in any sort of artistic endeavor do draw upon their positive and negative experiences as muses. It's not a coincidence when you look at the childhoods of a lot of comedians and you see that they did not exactly have it the best.
It's also not surprising when you look at the lives of comedians and see that a bunch of them are depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, case in point, Robin Williams. May he rest in peace.
Amen to that.
Here.
But shifting beyond that, there is one particular thing there is one particular bad habit I see with fiction writers that I do that is not in this woke category, but it's one that I see happen quite a bit, and that is an inability to follow through on one's own rules. This is one of my biggest red flags.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you can't follow the rules you've established, you've got an issue. Unless there is a very specific plot-driven and singular event and reason for breaking it this one time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a big thing, and everybody says, that shouldn't have happened, that's impossible, how could this possibly happen? Things along those lines. And you keep writing and things like that keep happening, well, then all you're doing there is Deus Ex Machina every time you write yourself into a corner.
Yeah, basically, it's like this. Like it's like the Highlander franchise, right?
There can be only one. Franchise. There's only one movie. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, what if? But there is one constant. No matter how bad the movie or series, the series is actually all right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's only one aspect: holy ground. No one ever fights on holy ground, and whoever does that, well, bad juju tends to happen to them. So let's say some idiot writer or these days decide to make a Highlander movie, and all of a sudden they decide to have a duel in a church. That would be breaking the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was one time we actually saw that happen in one of the movies where someone attacked McLeod in the middle of Holy Ground, and it caused such a backlash that all of the windows in the place exploded.
No, what I mean to say is they're fighting in a church and there's no repercussions.
Oh yeah, well that happened.
The closest there was one instance that came close to that, and you want to take a guess which movie did this?
Endgame?
Highlander 2, right?
No, The Source.
Oh yeah, the one that I keep trying to forget.
No, we don't talk about that one. That one has a yakety sax moment. Fuck you.
Do not remind me of The Source. That's an abortion of a Highlander movie. That's pretty much the franchise.
Talk about what movie?
Exactly.
That killed the fucking franchise.
And I will note a bit of amusement with there was only one entry that played around with the whole holy ground thing in a way that I found entertaining, and that was the anime movie. You know, with the whole thing of, well, if I'm immortal, what do I have to fear? Pain. And immediately he gets struck by a lightning bolt for being dumb enough to hold a metal sword and Stonehenge.
Oh God.
And I only have one reaction to Highlander movie, the anime. Whoa!
Xana, I didn't get those eardrums anyway.
You're welcome. That was poorly executed on purpose.
I hate
Are
you.
Are you talking about the series from back in the 90s?
No, he's referencing the meme that used a clip from that one Lost Horizons song. You know, when the face melter meme was around for like a minute.
Yep.
But one example of breaking rules that I've brought up a few times, and some comic book diehards have tried to defend is Man of Steel.
That. Now,
it's made very apparent that Kryptonians need a suit in order to filter out the effects of yellow sunlight. Otherwise, it gets overwhelming for them unless they've spent some time getting used to it.
And because Superman was raised on Earth, he's gotten very used to it.
And even with that, there were several awkward moments where he was just where he kept screwing up.
Yep.
the whole thing of taking advantage of this weakness was what did in several of the other Kryptonians. And then all of a sudden, during the third act, General Zod is able to just take off his armor with no problem because he trained to master his senses, according to him.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Aaron on that one.
It's now. Could I reasonably guess that a trained soldier could master their senses in that regard? Yes, but then that brings the question: why only him? Like, if all it takes is that kind of intensive training, why didn't that apply to the other Kryptonians?
Well, because he's a general. He's been around longer and has more experience, don't you know?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I've been drinking only beer for 18 years, but I'm going to jug this bottle of whiskey, and I sure as hell won't black out, and it's not going to be unbelievable at all.
It's like, hey, I didn't black out. Then all of a sudden, you hold that pose and you fall over sideways.
Yeah, but that would be trope achieved just through comedic means.
Mm-hmm.
What Doku described is exactly what trope is inverted, subverted right now. Of I've just been drinking beer, normally for the last however many years. If I drink this entire bottle of whiskey, I should be fine. And then they are, and nothing happens.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the issue. They broke their rules.
Yeah.
I mean, when done for comedic purposes, there are ways that breaking rules can work, but it has to be done in a very specific way because otherwise it's just bad, and don't do it.
Oh please! This movie was produced by the Nolan brothers. They have no concept of comedy.
You're not wrong. Like I said, there are some times where breaking rules work when you're trying to achieve a very, very, very specific outcome or get a very specific reaction from your audience. This is not one of those ways. This is not one of those ways. It's not one of those times.
Yeah,
Man of Steel was all about being serious business, so it just didn't fit.
Let me also add, by breaking some rules, you create one of the most dreaded character aspects, the Mary Sue.
Marty Stew.
Well,
or Marty Stew.
Well,
Mary Stew, or whatever.
You don't necessarily create those just by breaking rules. There is a specific setup that has to occur when breaking the rules for them.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that breaking the rules does create, especially if you do it often enough to be super noticeable, is plot holes. You'll create plot holes that way. Fair and simple.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And I know that there was that one infamous guy who tried to say that we should stop complaining about plot holes, but I had replied with allow me to retort. I don't take orders from people who aren't paying me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
go ahead.
depending on how bad the plot hole is, some can be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a very minor plot hole and it doesn't break the story outright, just you can ignore it. You can just say, okay, I don't like it, but it's not going to ruin the story for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a whole bunch of them, or you have ones that are so massive that it breaks the story, no, you don't get to call that argument. You have to deal with that.
And with a lot of
fanfiction, they create their own crap.
Fanfiction is a whole other can of worms, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is also my bread and butter. So go ahead, Walter.
Now, the reason I find that the best thing for writers, and I will freely admit that I'm guilty of this, and I think anybody who's writing any sort of fictionalized area, whether it be a fictionalized version of a real world city, or a fictionalized world, especially if they're doing one that's further and further removed from the real world, needs to, before they even start writing a chapter, they need to create a series Bible. I know for a fact that there are some TV shows that have done this, where they have a series Bible that lays out the characters, the locations, the relationships between each, and just a general set of guidelines to keep everything largely consistent. This even applies in video games to a degree. The Doom Bible is a thing. But when and I believe it's even more paramount when you have multiple people writing, so that you don't have everybody going off in their own particular direction.
Yeah.
Dude, that sounds like something that a certain franchise could use right about now.
If you need an example of one of these sort of Bible kind of rules, I refer you to Judge Dredd. It's been an ironclad rule since day one. Dredd doesn't take his helmet off. Ever. Even when sleeping, he sleeps in uniform.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, I think that's what people chastise the Stallone Dredd, because he took his helmet off like in the first the first 30 minutes in or something. You know, shit.
I will admit that I've put Stallone off the hook when it came to that movie, because even he has admitted that was a wasted opportunity. Especially since, and I do agree with Joshua on this, Dredd was the perfect character Stallone was the perfect character to play Dredd at that time. Given the fact that the whole concept of Dredd is a parody / satire of the Dirty Harry mindset, and he kind of spearheaded that with films like Cobra.
Yeah.
But
that's why the more recent Dredd movie was so much better.
Oh yeah, I loved the design for Mega City 1 in Dredd. I loved it a lot, 10 times better than Stallone Dredd.
Anyway,
yeah. Now, since Lady K was kind enough to leave Chekhov's gun on the table, I may as well fire it. And I want to talk a bit about fan fiction, but not in the sense that one might think, because the idea of fan fiction being a very open affair is a relatively new thing, all things considered. Especially when it comes to various novels. For the longest time, I think I can vouch on this. There's been plenty of authors who had a very draconian attitude about fan fiction, where they would try and get fan fiction sites and the like shut down the moment they found out about them.
Yeah, that was all throughout the late 90s and early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. And if I recall correctly, I think Anne Rice was one of the more notorious examples of this, where she was on a crusade against any fan fiction.
Yeah, she's still notorious for this. Not for the same reasons. She's no longer trying to get every fan fiction thrown out. She's just trying to get any fan fiction she thinks makes her writing look bad thrown out now. Anne Rice hasn't improved. She's just changed methods because she feels this one is more effective. Both are shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I had to bring up Harry Potter in this instance, because Rowling kind of bucked that trend in the late 90s, since she was fairly open to the concept.
of course, you could argue that she swung the pendulum the other way on that regard, because it led to the infamous My Immortal.
Here's the thing about that. Freedom of expression, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows My Immortal is terrible. Everybody laughs at it. Everybody makes jokes about it. That's the marketplace of ideas.
Yep.
I gotta get to bed. Good night, guys.
All right, stay
Good night.
Kier.
See you later, Kier.
Later, Kier.
But when it And to be fair, there have been fanzines around since the 70s. Like Star Trek had a fanzine for the longest time that hosted fan fiction called The Menagerie, which oddly enough is where the term Mary Sue initially comes from.
Yep.
It came from a satirical story written by one of the Menagerie's editors called A Trekkie's Tale. That was basically a "don't fucking do this" satire of the bad fanfics that they would get, because obviously being one of the larger fanzines, they would get hundreds and hundreds of submissions. And as Sturgeon's Law would dictate, most of them were ass.
Yep. 90% of everything is crap.
Mm-hmm.
So, just for kicks and giggles, guys, the Trekkie's Tale is only like 5 very short paragraphs if anybody wants to read it, and it is about Lieutenant Mary Sue.
Yes. I am not going to be reading it on stream because
I know.
That's pretty on the nose.
Although I will read the last line just because this is hilarious. Even to this day, Mary Sue's birthday is a national holiday of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
How is the Enterprise a nation? There are multiple questions that sentence alone raises, but all you need to know, all you need to know, guys, is don't write like that. That was the entire point of that little satirical short story.
Although I'm seeing one argument in the last few months in bad faith that I do need to address. Certain hacks, flans, whichever derogatory term you want to come up with, have been trying to push forward the argument that a chosen one is a Mary Sue.
No.
Bullshit.
Yeah, no.
Avatar
There is
Aang was a chosen one, and he wasn't a Mary Sue.
Yeah, there's a very distinct difference between a Mary Sue / Gary Stu and a chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
As we've established, a Mary Sue is somebody who basically the story bends over backwards to make them correct. It makes them untouchable, basically.
I'm perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Makes them perfect. And that they can do no wrong. A chosen one is someone who basically the story, because of the way the story is written, they are now the destined hero. They have, it doesn't matter what their actions are, it doesn't matter what they do, they were already destined to be the hero of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Very distinct difference there.
Yeah, and I first saw this particular argument. Now, some people first saw this argument when people were trying to argue that Luke was a Mary Sue, but I saw this a bit further back when some people were trying to argue that Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender was a Mary Sue, as a backhanded way to try and say that Aang is just as bad as Korra. To which I say that saying that's the and I had replied. That's like saying a Taurus is just as good as a Smith and Wesson.
Now, when it comes to Avatar in general, both of them are chosen ones because the Avatar the power of the Avatar chose them.
Mm-hmm.
But Aang had flaws. Aang had struggles. He had days where things did not go the way he wanted them to. He is not a Gary Stu. He does not fit that in any capacity.
The struggles,
he had to grow.
Yeah, the struggles were presented in such a way that he grew, whereas Korra is someone who does not grow and is used entirely for torture.
That's the other thing I can't help but notice. Does anyone else find it somewhat amusing that so often people who write Mary Sue characters seem to really put their Mary Sues in torture situations often?
They feel they have to create some semblance of struggle, but because they can't actually make a good struggle, that is their out.
Mm-hmm. That's
Plus,
one.
you
That's
never
one
know;
way to
they
put
might
it.
actually enjoy writing their main characters that way as a sick thrill.
At the very least, Clive Barker was honest about the clubs that he would frequent.
Oh, I'm just gonna drink. Not just gonna give that one a comment.
I'm not going to comment.
Look, he outright admitted that it was at one of those clubs where he got the visual inspiration for Pinhead, even though he hates it being called that.
It's a Cenobites.
Specifically the Hell Priest.
Yeah, the Cenobite Hell Priest, who everybody calls Pinhead because of the pins in his head.
Yeah, and he hates that name, but it's stuck, and
If the shoe fits,
Yeah.
there's also the story of the Count character from Clive Barker's Undying, which is really underrated, where I forget the guy's full name, but he had stormed into the writers' room. He had stormed into the writers' room, going, "Does anybody know a Count? Does anybody know a guy named this? make the main character somebody I'd actually want to sleep with." Which is certainly fun. It's certainly funny as hell, but it was fairly apropos for especially given the story that Undying is dealing with. Like having a more comic booky kind of character just wouldn't work. I just find the fact that he stormed in and that was the argument that he had used absolutely hilarious.
Clive Barker.
When it comes to the whole Mary Sue thing, the other thing that is very interesting to note when it comes to the whole chosen ones, actual chosen ones, tend to have a very reliable track record on one, screwing up, and two, being the one person in the world who doesn't want the role.
Yeah.
It's the crisis of identity that happens with a chosen one is a pretty identifiable trope, actually.
Yeah.
Where they're like, "I don't want this. Take it away. I don't want this. Please." I mean, that's even hinted at in places of some religious chosen ones, and I'm not even meaning Abrahamic religions, but religions around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That type of responsibility where you're told, yeah, you specifically, your destiny is to do a great thing that helps a lot of people, and if you mess it up, all these people suffer and die.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight to put on somebody. And of course, in good cases of chosen one narratives, because there are plenty of bad ones. I've seen quite a few myself.
Mm-hmm.
You have that struggle of like, why me? Why am I the one that got chosen for this? Why do I have to be the one to save the world? It's like, I don't want this responsibility. And it's only after dealing with that and then seeing what is at stake that the chosen one steps up and goes, okay, now I get it. I'm ready to do this.
Yeah. And the thing that I'm kind of hinting at with this is that within those stories, and even to a degree, a lot of I'd say a lot of battle anime, you see this quite a bit, where there is a very clear hierarchy, and even the supposed chosen one is usually at the bottom of it, or at the point when they start to understand that hierarchy.
This is actually kind of countered to how a lot of wuxia and shansha works, though.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be honest. Even in wuxia and shansha, the chosen ones understand that they're chosen and understand that they're at the bottom of a hierarchy, and now are doing everything that they can to exploit their way to the top.
Yeah, I'd say it's a case of different styles for different approaches of authorship. Obviously, in that case.
Oh, and it's different cultural values.
Yeah, I was
too.
going to say there's probably also a cultural factor.
Oh yes. But another really major sin that I want to touch on, especially given one of the books that we see here is what is known as purple prose.
Oh God.
Because a lot, I remember, I am a masochist. I am both a sadist and a masochist. And I'm obviously, the sadism part obviously comes from things like, I don't know, wrapping up somebody's Christmas present in flex tape. And for the record, yes, that was the same gift that I did for the whole box in a box in a box, each box wrapped with flex tape.
God, you're such a dick, and I love it.
And what was at the bottom of all those boxes? A pair
box.
of socks.
Oh,
A pair of
God.
white socks.
I was expecting you to give them a thing of flex tape, half
Now-
used.
As a disclaimer, Monk, I will have to say that purple prose doesn't have a distinct definition and is thus somewhat subjective.
Yeah.
There are clear examples of what is purple prose that you can point at. There are some big ones. But sometimes if in a work, what may seem like purple prose is just the author's writing style, and then you compare it to other places in some of their other books, and yeah, it kind of fits.
I can definitely see that because one game that I love but I have a hard time recommending to people is I Divine Cybermancy.
Oh, I love that game.
Which it is the game that gave me the bruise off meme and the my legs are okay, as well as the game that gave us the glory of a certain SMG that has two modes, full auto and fuller auto. You know, where you dump an entire clip in 5 seconds.
I remember that.
And the thing is that first off, the game was originally put out in French, and the translation is spotty. But the fan patch to try and fix the translation I don't like using for a very specific reason. There are parts with first off, much like You Spoony Bard, there are certain parts of the bad translation that have their own charm, like somebody saying that they're going to rip your face off and wear it as a moron party mask. And there are also parts that are intended to be nonsensical and incoherent. It also the fan patch also removes some of the context, like the whole I killed my mentor, but I'm not his murderer, where it was translated to Master, it wasn't my fault, which is technically accurate, but it kind of removes the context later on. But my definition when it comes to purple prose, and this may differ for some of you, is when you have large blocks of writing that not only are a lot of descriptive writing that doesn't really say anything, but also goes so far in that non-saying with the amount of time that it takes that it calls attention to itself.
Yeah, which is again why it can be somewhat subjective in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a test I always like to use is if you have a large block of text within a larger prose. It can read like poetry, it can come across as dense, but could you say it out loud and does it sound like you're rapping without a beat? If that's the case, you might want to rethink it. Because more often than not, you're probably falling into the trap of purple prose.
Mm-hmm.
Guilty.
I've done it myself too, and I've had to go back and do this as well, because I've had to reword things for that very reason.
Oh my gracious! I have. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember when I used to roleplay on forums, paragraph roleplay back and forth. Everything was purple prose because word count counted for strength.
Oh my god.
And then there was me making the concise paragraphs, but making multiples. And everybody's like, but why are you making so many paragraphs? I'm like, because I'm getting all my hypotheticals in. and I still got more words than you. And I didn't have to resort to describing that one vein on that one muscle on that one leg as you were kicking.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, those were the days.
But when it comes to that is partially the reason why I asked for the cover of Twilight on this, because like I said, I'm equal parts sadist and a masochist, and I suffered through reading all 4 fucking books.
You crazy motherfucker.
Oh my god!
I did the same.
And
That's like Chinese water torture.
no, if you want Chinese water torture, go read War and Peace.
Twilight is Death of a Thousand Cuts covered with lemon juice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
But I know it. I know there's the meme about how fucking stupid it is to have vampires sparkle, but you would think that that's the thing that would piss me off when it comes to Twilight. Not the case.
I heard the books were even more ridiculous.
Both the books and the film suffer from one glaring problem for me.
Pacing.
Way too fucking long.
Yeah, the pacing's all
You
off.
have these long stretches of nothing happening.
So too much. So basically filler.
Pretty much, and
Except it's not even filler. There's nothing filling it. It's void.
like when you're taking entire pages, half of an entire chapter just describing someone's appearance.
God, I hate that.
It borders on excessive and starts to reach into the level of fetishistic. And
Well, let's be fair. Stephanie Meyer is just a teenage girl in an older woman's body writing wish fulfillment for teenage girls.
well, it certainly doesn't hurt that she can't take criticism, and I have a personal story on this that I've mentioned.
She
By the
writes
way-
at a 7th grade level. She writes
So
at a 7th grade level.
Basically, this is the problem with Twilight.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, like if somebody wants to. If somebody wants to do the whole sparkling thing, it's like, okay, fine, that you're establishing your rules, whatever. Your rules still suck, but I'll give the devil its due and on that at least. I have my moments of kindness.
Sparkling vampires and imprinting on infants, those are some fucked up rules.
Yeah, really.
It's still fucked up, but I'm far less forgiving on wasting my time. And that is something that I saw a lot, and especially it's funny that when she was pressed by someone about why she didn't try and condense her work down 100 less pages or so, she said, "I'm a writer."
Not an argument.
Except
that is not an
No.
excuse.
That explains it perfectly. She's a writer, not an author.
There is a difference.
Fair enough.
She just
I
writes and doesn't think about the editorial process at all.
will
She
actually
is
concede
a
to that.
literal writer, literal definition.
So in that case, if that's the case, then are we led to believe that whole book wasn't even fucking proofread?
It stands to reason.
I'm not going to cast aspersions on that without any, unless I have something more than just speculation.
I'm guessing the publishing house probably put it through an editorial process, to be honest.
I would like to hope so, since it was from a proper publishing house. This wasn't a case of self-writing and self-editing, and I seriously doubt that this thing would have flown on just faith alone. Nobody's that desperate.
Well, whoever
Mildred,
edited this, whoever
I gotta-
edited this,
sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
so whoever edited this, good God, they must have ran out of they must have ran out of Sharpies or something.
I would imagine.
Anyway,
Doku, you were saying?
But yeah, at the time, young adult novels were selling very well, but print industry as a whole, not so much. So it stands to reason that the publishing house saw it was good enough for the young adult audience,
oh,
and they just went ahead and decided, you know what? Yeah, vampires are in, young adults making money. This is the best thing we got, so we might as well railroad it through.
Let's not forget that Twilight has an even bigger sin behind it, though, and that sin is that it spawned a fan fiction that became an official set of novels for the worst interpretation and portrayal of a BDSM-style relationship ever.
I remember
Thank you,
I remember
Jade.
watching a video by Crystal Garcia who absolutely railed on that in part because that she's in that community and just was completely disgusted.
No,
But-
trust me, as someone who is small note, I'm part of that community too. As someone who has been there, looking at that, I went, how is any of this enjoyable for either party if this is a real BDSM relationship? It's not. It's just, at that point, it's just non-consensual fetishization.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And I will freely admit I was dead tempted to use my 1 monthly freebie on seeing the first movie, and I didn't because you know that tingling sensation when you know something is going to be one of those legendarily bad ideas that you're going to regret for years.
The tingling sensation that also turns into the Ralph meme of I'm in danger.
Yeah, I don't like to call it intuition because I find that term's overrated, and I don't like calling it spider sense because I don't live in New York. But yeah, whenever I can, I've always had a good sense of when something's gonna turn out to be a really bad idea, and this was one of those cases.
There's a military term for that. Operational awareness.
you
know what,
I
I think I'll stick with that. I'm pretty sure the guys over at Battle Lords will appreciate that one, given all the military jokes in that book.
Exactly.
But that does bring me to another major sin, and this is why I wanted to include George R. R. Martin and and his work with A Song of Ice and Fire and The Wheel of Time, and that is character overload.
Oh, loads and loads and loads of characters.
Robert Jordan's biggest failing. This book has 3 characters. Those 3 characters meet 3 more characters in the next book, and so on, and so on, and so on.
So basically, he created a character pyramid. Is that what you're saying?
Character tree, because they're starting from the bottom and working their way up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
But yeah, you have to have an idea of how many characters do you honestly need in a story, because if you put in too many, you run the risk of not being able to develop the ones you already have, and thus they feel superfluous.
oh. You know what? Mind if I use a professional wrestling analogy here?
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. WWE tends to have this problem as well. They have so much fucking talent on their guys that they don't know what they're doing. So basically, they just pay attention to like one or two, or at most 4 or 5 wrestlers, and everyone else, you're either in the mid card or you're jobbing.
He's not wrong.
That's where you run the risk of having that. You transfer to literary work, it's pretty much the same thing. You're relegating half your cast to basically just walk in, they do something inconsequential, and that's it. That's it. Back to the shelf you go.
Now, the analogy that I like to use when it comes to now, first off, I want to make clear, I have no problem with the idea of a ensemble cast. In fact, with a lot of serialized works, you can use that to your advantage by having characters who can guest in and out to add context to a particular motif. Some, in fact, there's plenty of anime that have used this to pretty good effect, and plenty of and that's largely the conceit with every pulp story ever, especially say Conan and
Jensen, right
go ahead.
back.
All right. Where where you'll have them as the avenging angel type of person who comes into a place, usually try not to get into any trouble, ends up finding trouble, gets involved, solves the problem, and then moves on. So it's a reliable approach. Some
It's a
people
pretty good trope too of the 11th hour power.
Yeah. But the thing is, even within that, you have to have that one set of pillars that everything falls around. You need to have a lead for the audience to follow. Some people seem to have this idea that you can have a lead by committee. That never works. The only time you could possibly get away with that is if you're doing an anthology piece where the setting itself is the lead character. Something like okay, this is not exactly the best example, but I'm going to use it for the time being. Sin City.
Yeah, that I don't see a lot of that shit lately.
The comic book was better.
Just make this. Just make the city. Just make the city the main character, and everyone else is just along for the ride. It's like the same story device they did for Pulp Fiction, I believe.
No, Pulp Fiction did tend to surround the same core group of characters, that being Marcellus Wallace's people.
Mm-hmm. So that's also the reason why I was very tempted to use Heat Guy J and Kamen Rider Double in this situation. They don't apply either. The core of Heat Guy J is Daisuke Aurora, Claire Leonelli, and Jay.
Mm-hmm.
And of course with Double, even though the city of Futo is a character in and of itself, all roads have to lead to Rome, and in that case, Rome is Shotaro and Philip. And
Shotaro, Philip, and then later Terui.
Yeah. But when it comes to an ensemble, whenever you have that, you have a character that is the focal point, but you have other people who fill their own roles that the main character can't. I'd say if I needed a good example of this sort of ensemble approach, I refer to Cowboy Bebop.
Spike is definitely the lead, but the rest of the cast fulfills things that he can't.
Mm-hmm. Even if one of those parts of the cast is barely tolerated, and I can't blame any one of them. I know some people quote unquote dig crazy, but I'd like to keep my money where it is, thank you.
Yep.
And I know, and whenever it comes to the whole ensemble thing, a lot of people bring up Joss Whedon. I have issues with Whedon as a writer, and I'd say a lot of the times he was able to skirt past this issue because of the talent of the cast that he had around him. But
yeah,
the best way I can put it is that his characters don't have a unique voice.
Yeah.
They all have. With all of them, you have the notion of crack wise, but still have some level of professionalism, even with the trope that they're in. And even in cases where Whedon's particular writing isn't directly involved with him, I can still see this effect, like in like with the cast in ODST. And yeah, a lot of it is held up by the charisma and the chemistry of the actors involved. But when you don't have that, you just have effectively the same character that you've multiplied many times over.
Yeah.
I guess the best way for me to put it is that a proper character in these sort of things is one that has layers beyond just being either the comic relief, the straight man, or some variation between the two. I will use a DS9 example. And no, it's not going to be the motherfucking Cisco, not this time. Instead,
must be a sad day for you not to use the motherfucking Cisco.
No, instead I'm using Quark. The thing is with him is that you could it would be a easy writer would focus on the fact that Quark is a unscrupulous crook who only cares about business.
I mean, he is Ferengi. That's kind of a tautology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But throughout it, you do see that one, that's not always the case, and two, he definitely has reasons for some of his attitudes, especially when you see the rest of his family, and even more so his mother, who yes, it's true that the way women are treated in Ferengi society is awful. On the other hand, his mother is a complete and total bitch.
Yeah.
Noted.
Even with Quark being the more sympathetic character that he is, I still couldn't ever get into him because he's a fucking Ferengi. I hate the Ferengi.
Yeah, greedy ass bastards.
The problem with the Ferengi is the problem with other races in Trek of focused so much on this one particular thing that it becomes a farce. This is why the interpretation of Klingons as space Vikings I always hated, or the Herogen and Voyager whose entire culture is based around the hunt. Except the thing is, cultures don't act like that. Even cultures that would be considered warrior cultures or nomadic cultures, they're not all about the journey. They're not all about the fight. Or something like that.
That's just what's exalted in their society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really. I mean that for something as forward thinking as Star Trek, you'd think they would have some characters that actually buck their own culture for once instead of being a slave to it. Like for instance, any of the any of the Klingons, any of the God damn it, what is Garrick's race again? I forgot what Garrick's race. Cardassians, yes, thank you.
Cardassian.
When it comes to the whole bucking trends with that, I'd say a lot of that we see in DS9, and I would credit that with one factor. A lot of that was written by a man who was very, very vocal about bucking established trends with Trek, and that being Ron Moore. He had vocally expressed his frustration with the sameness that had occurred with the series, and you see this sort of subconscious rebellion in his other work, like when he handled Battlestar Galactica.
It didn't always result in good things, though.
No, but one particular instance that he had talked about when the anniversary of this episode came up was family, which episodes like Family and The Inner Light were well regarded, and I think The Inner Light ended up getting a Hugo. And Roddenberry absolutely hated Family. Just the idea that Picard would spend time to deal with a family issue, he did not see that as something that would happen in the Federation. And really for as forward yes, Trek has its moments as a forward-thinking show. The issue that ends up happening, and this is another cardinal sin, I believe, is an author putting too much of their own personal belief system into a work. With Roddenberry, that was his attitude of a humanistic utopia that superseded the human condition as a whole. It's to the point where he's so focused on that one thing that it becomes a farce. Which is why you have the joke about what the Federation would actually be run like, or that the Federation is actually communist. When it comes to the Federation or commies, I don't completely buy that, but I can see where the argument comes from.
Yeah.
The only reason it works, replicators.
That said, if you need other examples of this particular thing, a big one on the far eastern end of the equation would be some of the bad writing that Yasuko Kobayashi is guilty of. And I know certain colleagues of ours will die on that fucking hill, but to that I say, Shades, pass me the grenade launcher.
Right here, sir. Because I've kind of not been as friendly with her because I've seen the truth of it. She has good stories, but some of the other ones not so much.
Mm-hmm. And now I've danced around referring to this as politics because that's a very loaded word these days.
Yeah.
But she does insert her own personal beliefs a bit too much. And while obviously any author is going to insert a bit of themselves into their work, the line is how you do that.
Yeah. To give an example of how Kobayashi screwed this up, she tends to favor a more conformist philosophy. You know, you stay in line. Yeah, she has the idea of you stay in line, you do what you're told, you follow the rules. And the best example of this is the main villain of Tokyuger.
Mm-hmm.
The entire series is building up this idea that the main villain is trying to break away from his destiny of being, the ultimate darkness. And then at the last second, something happens and he suddenly just becomes that ultimate darkness. He just suddenly conforms. There's no explanation. There's very little explanation for it. It doesn't make any sense why he would do it. He just does. And it completely kills the story. Because she had to stick in her idea of you stay in your lane. You cannot step outside your boundary. This is what you are going to do. Nothing will change that.
Mm-hmm.
If I can comment.
Go ahead.
Uh-oh.
Waiting to get a word in edgewise.
Sorry.
It's not your guys' fault. I mean, I don't like to interrupt people is what it is, so I'm polite to a fault. I know. Not a good mindset to have here in the monastery. I already know it's a freaking monk.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Hud, go ahead.
When I hear the words stay in your lane, the only thing I have to fucking say is fuck you, you fucking fuck.
Yeah. Anyone tells you to stay in your lane, guess what? Let's just say I'm gonna be swerving for a while.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be doing my best. What you call it? You know how some of these people like to use their motorcycles to like weave in and out of traffic. Yeah. You tell me to stay in my lane. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be doing a little weaving.
Although
There's a reason that one of my three most hated analogies is life is like a highway, pick a lane and stick to it.
Yeah. No.
Fuck you.
Now, to
Now-
be fair. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, hon.
Okay. Now, part of this is because, one, as a writer, I don't like to be penned in to just one area. I mean, I as a writer myself, I dabble in fantasy and romance. Those are my main genres. But just because I write those doesn't mean I don't want to write other things. So, on the writing aspect, don't fucking stay in your lane. Don't make your characters stay in one lane, because that will kill any semblance of plot and storyline that you have, period.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on a professional note, this is in reference to the stay in your lane issue from, what was it, 2 years ago? Or was that last year?
What?
Stay in your lane nurses thing.
Oh. Are
Was
you
that
talking
2 years
about?
ago or was it last year?
Are you talking about like a certain nurse that was trying to do something else, or?
No, that it was healthcare workers in general being told to stay in their lane, and that certain things didn't, that gun violence didn't apply to them.
Oh, let's kind of be careful walking that line, hon, because that's starting to get into politics.
Mm-mm.
Hon, your mic cut out again.
God damn it. Oh, still getting used to the new headset, sorry.
All right.
Anywho.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'll be nice and not even get into that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, anyone who if you can write a story, like to get back onto the main point of the top of the people interjecting their own personal philosophies and ideas. If you can write a story based on your personal ideas and philosophies and make it a compelling story, great. That's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you write a story that is designed to go one way and then you decide to completely change that despite how your story's been set up, just so you can interject your philosophies. That is a problem.
That's called agitprop.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, you make it into agitprop. I mean, again, like you said, it's okay to put your own beliefs in there, but the problem here is when it comes to doing that, there's a fine line between actually telling a good story and just pure agitprop. And that's another thing what most filmmakers and writers do too much of these days. They don't know the freaking line, and they don't even know, they're not even where they cross it. And if they do, they really don't give a fuck.
Now, this is also the reason why there's one line that has been approached in the subject of art that I find that the term itself is forest for the trees, and that is the whole whether or not art is inherently political. My approach with it personally, and this kind of ties into that whole putting too much of oneself in it, is that the proper way to do this kind of thing is to not have a answer to the question. And if you think that I'm going with modern agitprop, no, I'm not going to use that as my example of what not to do. What I'm going to be using as my example of what not to do in this regard is the comic version of Civil War. And fuck me for saying this, but
oh boy,
the MCU version of Civil War is better.
Yeah, I don't think there's much argument there. There's very little argument there.
Largely because of this is largely because of the fact that the comic book version, for starters, has many problems. One least of which being having established characters acting goddamn retarded. Hi, Maria Hill. Also, Hi. Well, to be fair, he makes a lot of really dumb decisions. But hi, Tony Stark.
Yeah,
Oh my
Tony's
God.
genius kind of just checked out for that entire comic arc.
Oh, absolutely. So actually, I wanted to interject a point because I hear the whole all art is political thing, and I think the reason why people have an issue with that and why it is a legit issue, I should clarify, is that people are looking at they're using the wrong term. All art is not political. All art is philosophical. All of us have our own philosophies, our own ideals, and a lot of what we create is going to be inspired by our lives, like the things we've learned, the things we've done, the things we believe in. The problem is that people use the wrong term there. They see political and philosophical, and they interchange those words. That's not the case.
Especially considering that politics have something to do with how society itself is managed, whether that's governmental or other hierarchical means. And philosophies are a very subjective and interpersonal thing.
Exactly. And I think that people get that mistake. They think that just because a creator has put their own personal philosophies into a work, they think that's connected with their politics.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem keeps coming up.
Well, and then that extends, sorry to cut you off, Monk, but that extends beyond all art is political. You see people making the argument of, well, no, art is personal. And that ties into art is philosophical, as Shades made. And then, of course, you then have the smug, holier than thou, my nose is 50 feet in the air retort of, the personal is political.
Oh,
I want to punch those people in the face every time I read, hear, or see that.
I'm kind of with you on that one there, Zan.
Oh, no. If anyone ever said that to me in real life, I'd be going to jail for a fucking charge.
Yeah. You know what? For those who tend to do that, Shades, I think we can do a. Should we do a preemptive day to those idiots?
I would, except my audio and Discord's fucking up. I'm gonna try to do this, but my audio's been acting up, so I don't know if it might fuck up my microphone if I set this up. Yeah. Do I still sound okay?
No.
Hey, you're fuzzy.
Yeah, that's what I've been
Don't
having
worry.
trouble.
You know what? I'll do it. Dave!
See, I can't bang my desk because my desk is made out of tempered glass, and the last time I did that, my ring hit it and shattered the fucking thing.
Ooh.
Literally.
Yeah.
Lucky we had a spare pane from my desk to put on it.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back on topic here.
That being said, there is one similar remark that gets brought up when it comes to art that I do find equally contentious, and that is the notion that I often see this with fairly popular genres that are long running, or IPs that are long running, and that is reducing the totality of a given IP, a given storytelling conceit, what have you, to this one specific thing. I think I've seen this a few times when it comes to Star Wars, where somebody would go, Star Wars is just blank, as a way to win their argument, as if they can encapsulate the entirety of what a decades-long franchise is about.
Decades-long franchise with varying canonicity on its extended universe.
I've seen this as well when I saw this as well when it came to the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, about what it was about. And oftentimes I find that whenever you see these sort of things, it's always from the position of a jaded academia. Martin is really guilty of this. He would make a bunch of remarks about what Lord of the Rings is, One of which I never really got, was that he argued that it was classist.
What?
Oh, actually, you know what? This actually brings it, because this actually this kind of argument's come up recently with a show, with an anime that we watched just last night, or well, 2 nights ago, technically, as a matter of fact. Oh no, it was last night because it was after midnight. Attack on Titan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whatever your feelings on the final season, and I'll be straight honest, I don't care for it. But people online, a lot of haters online, have been saying that at this point, after with the way season 4 has been going, people are basically now saying Attack on Titan is fascist. Yeah,
God almighty.
because of the Empire and all the other shit that's been going on.
Drink.
Yeah, fucking drink.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't like the way the story kind of shifted gears in the end of season 3/season 4. I don't care for it, but that's my personal opinion. But I would not go so far as to say Attack on Titan is fascist. All right, that's just a stupid argument.
As many of you know, I'm a fan of Warhammer 40K. And I've heard this particular argument when it comes to the Imperium of Man for years. And I've also heard this argument when it comes to Starship Troopers, which is a case of as much as I like the Starship Troopers movie, one,
The books are better.
The books are better, and two, Paul Verhoeven was very clear that he never really got the books.
Oh,
Like you look at the, which is why you
That's
look at the.
stupid. Use your common sense.
That's not to say that the film is without merit. It's just once you look at the books, you realize how wide that gap is.
It's
How
almost
far off
apples
the
and
mark it
oranges
is.
between the two.
Mm-hmm. But in both cases, the argument is that the Terran Republic in Starship Troopers is fascist, and that the Imperium of Man is fascist in Warhammer 40K. And both of them, in my opinion, are a case of take. You see this. I see this a lot in discourse from both creators and from fans, where they take one or two bullet points about something, ignore the context, ignore the greater implications, and come to a conclusion. Sometimes it's done for meme purposes, and other times it's done legit.
I mean, we already know that the Imperium of Man is just the Space Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
That's another big problem. They confuse a militarist society with fascism. That's pretty stupid.
It's even more laughable when you when this sort of thing is applied to the Terran Republic, because for starters,
It's a republic.
For starters, it's a republic so it's kind of hard to have a fascistic republic when that's going to involve multiple hands in the pot, just from the nature of it being a republic. But second is the fact that the territories and the like, with the territories, colonies, and the like within the Terran Republic all have a significant degree of autonomy.
Yep.
In fact, for the most part, they're left to themselves unless shit goes down. The whole kind of like the Imperium's layered defense strategy,
Which failed because Gilliman is an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
But
like I said, don't.
Aaron, I wasn't done.
Oh, go ahead. I'm still trying to collect my thoughts here.
What's even more funny is when you use this in regard to because some people have used the outfits and attitudes of the mobile infantry to justify this argument, ignoring the fact that the mobile infantry is a army that is 100% voluntary. No one is conscripted into the mobile infantry. It's all voluntary, and the training for the mobile infantry is so hellish as a means to weed out the people who might be wishy-washy about doing it. But at every opportunity, you are given the chance to take the walk down Washout Lane and leave.
Yep. Just remember, service guarantees citizenship.
Exactly. Oh, here's what I was about to say. People all this shit about associating fascism with strong military and all a militaristic society. Has anyone seen Eric July's Twitter as of late, battling these idiots? It's basically saying they don't know that he tried to explain what fascism is, and they're basically saying, "Oh, that's not what fascism is." It's like
they're using the no true Scotsman argument, and when it comes to that, here's the thing. What defines fascism is going to differ, but an agreed upon definition is the one that was put forth by Mussolini. The idea of everything within the state, nothing outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And given how in those sort of situations you have the idea that the highest point of virtue is serving the state. If there's any faction within science fiction that I would say actually would qualify as fascist, it would be the Cardassians.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Especially given how Garrick talks about a book called The Never-Ending Sacrifice. That's about several generations serving the state, and this book is seen as highly revered.
That's some nice propaganda.
Mm-hmm. But
like I said, the actual definition, if you really think about it, it's a lot different than all the buzzword bingo they like to use.
I do not give any time to the definition that small minds use, because they are operating solely on what makes them feel good, and that is not how I work. That is never how I will work. And I've had some people accuse me of being robotic because of that attitude. I will take being a robot versus being a bunch of steam any day of the week. But that does bring me to another cardinal sin that I think is worth noting, and that is somebody trying way too hard to be a antithesis. This is the reason why I bring up A Song of Ice and Fire, because as somebody who has read through the first 3 books, and and has a bit of a betting pool about which will be released first, Yandere Simulator or Winds of Winter.
My vote's Yandere Simulator.
No, Jan Sim's gone backwards since his latest update. He's basically not going forward at all.
Anyway, I'm gonna cut out, guys. I'm getting a little tired.
All right, man.
Dude,
Stay
have
frosty.
a good one.
Peace out.
But the thing is, he has made no bones about how critical he is of the Lord of the Rings, and when you look at a lot of the stuff that he does within his stories, he very much wants to be the antithesis to the Lord of the Rings. The problem is he focuses so much on doing that the pendulum swings too far the other way. It's a case of the lady doth protest too much. And I know that might seem contradictory given how I've praised Battlestar Galactica for doing a zigzag attitude compared to Star Trek. But the thing is with that, that particular affair was subconscious. Ron Moore was not trying to be the anti-Star Trek with Battlestar Galactica. What he was trying to do was effectively a story a story in the style that he wanted to do. That's the main difference. His goal was simply to tell the story that he did, for better and for worse. The ending to Battlestar Galactica is a very scub affair that I'm not going to get into quite yet. But even with that, there is very much the theme of having to earn one's light, and the relationship between parent and child within Battlestar Galactica. At least with his take. I know the diehards of the original don't care for it. I do not care for nostalgia. But another example of this particular being an antithesis approach is when someone is very clearly thinks that by going the opposite route of what came before, that it'll make them seem less derivative. If a prime example of this that we've used several times already is The Legend of Korra. You know, having the whole, and a lot of these opposites are surface level. Whether it be having a female avatar versus a male avatar, or having someone who's adept in multiple bending styles at the start, as opposed to someone who's adept in just one, or the like. Whenever going the opposite route of someone else's work is the beginning of a story, but it's only a short-term fix. I'm pretty sure plenty of you can think of examples where somebody tried to do a story in response to another case, and it ends up backfiring hard. And since we brought up Kobayashi before, I feel I need to throw some shade at a certain Sentai crossover that really annoyed me.
Oh God.
The Kyoryuger versus Tokyuger crossover.
Oh yeah.
Putting aside the fact that I hate the age regression plot point. In general, I don't like it. She very much had a bone to pick with the way Kyoryuger was presented, and tried to present them as unnecessarily showboaty. And obviously the inevitable happened, where it ended up becoming a farce in and of itself. But that also applies to something else that I think a lot of us have seen, and that is someone putting in a motif or a story beat, or even a character reveal, and only thinking one step ahead
instead of tying it all in.
Yeah, not thinking about the implications of some sort of revelation.
That, this revelation I'm just revealing for the shock factor, essentially.
Yes. There some really bad examples of Trek and Doctor Who monsters are example of this, like the whole spore thing in Fear Her.
Ugh.
Which, given how dangerous one of them is, and how they spawn in mass quantities, the obvious question is, if they're that dangerous, why are people shitting themselves over the Daleks? And I'd say another big instance is, and this is one plot point that I know a lot of people have issues with, is explaining something that didn't need to be explained. Some things are better left ambiguous. And I think we've all seen plenty of times where something was not explained in the story, So either in a follow-up or a creator's comment, they feel that they need to explain this particular story element. It's like, let people's imagination go where it goes. Okay, don't let it go that far, but you get my point. One example that always comes to mind for me was Mole. From Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite character.
Where there's the whole thing of you don't want to know what his deal is, and then in that attempt at a series that they just repackaged as a sequel, they explained, oh, he was raised by naked mole rats,
Which was something that never needed explanation.
Mm-hmm. It never needed explanation, and
No one ever asked.
yeah. Because the thing is, I think this is the reason why a video like Stop Talking About Plot Holes exists, because maybe it's just me, but it seems that some people have this notion that anything that is unexplained in a story is a plot hole.
Nope.
That's incorrect.
It is. It definitely seems to be a mindset I see among people who don't have the humility in regard to the complexities of storytelling. It's even more funny when you try and apply this kind of thing to stories that intentionally are fairy tales or are in the matter of weird fiction. Like imagine trying to apply this whole you have to explain everything with one of H.P. Lovecraft's works.
Yeah.
If you explained everything, then the fact that they are literally inexplicable beings that drive humans to madness trying to comprehend them would not work.
Yeah, somebody did try and approach the question of why do they drive people to madness trying to comprehend them?
Does that matter? They drive people to madness trying to comprehend them. That's it.
Yeah.
You can't explain that because that gets rid of everything.
And I'd say
Please explain to me the incomprehensible being using the written word. How? Do you not see how this is a catch-22?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of defeats the entire purpose.
Yeah. I'd say another major example of this kind of thing of needing to explain of feeling the need to explain too much. As much as I enjoy most of the films, this is where I have to throw shade at the Nolan Batman trilogy. Largely because of the fact that Nolan goes almost to a fetishistic degree of explaining every single little detail of Batman in order to try and justify him in the setting that he's in. With
this nittier, grittier Batman with all the military hardware,
or my favorite line, that it is realistic.
Yeah.
Let all you filthy casuals who may be listening on a little secret. You cannot have a realistic Batman.
not possible.
No.
Not even close.
If you want a realistic Batman, the Punisher is that way, and even that's a stretch.
Yeah.
Yep.
There is kind of a side thread I want to pull on that's related to this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big issue not only comes with that there are a lot of creators who, as you said, have this almost fetish about trying to overly explain things or make things overly realistic, but I do think a big part of the issue also falls on modern audiences where they're either too used to popcorn movies, but they need to have something make sense to them. They need to have it explained to them, whether it's through either they lack imagination or they're too lazy to pick up on subtle context clues or hints. You know, maybe you forgot about that one scene at the beginning of the movie that should at least point you in the right direction, or from audience members that so desperately want to see their own idea, their own view of how the author is thinking or what type of allegories or themes they're going with confirmed coming from the horse's mouth, for lack of a better analogy. I do think that type of mindset has led a lot to this over explanation while at the same time being very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not lazy. Pushiness, either from the storyteller or from the audience, to try to make something go away they want it to be, when it doesn't have to be the case.
I don't
Sometimes
like,
things are better left unexplained.
I don't like using the notion of audiences being dumbed down, because that feels a little bit too easy.
I feel it's more a case of, especially in things like you're explaining to justify the existence of something in a more realistic world.
Mm-hmm.
It comes to the notion that if something is too fantastic, it's for children.
Well, and I want to avoid the misconception of audiences having been dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
It's because that's not what I'm trying to say, because I don't feel that way at all. I guess it's a change in audience expectations and what they'll allow certain type of creators to get away with while not holding other creators to that same standard. I guess that's the only term I can really think of. It's a shift in expectation. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And that's my only point.
I do think a lot of times you have certain audiences you have certain people who who have a very low opinion of their audience, which is why you have the whole nobody's going to believe this kind of attitude when more often than not, if you present it properly, that doesn't have to be the case. But but the reason why I don't want to go with the whole Hollywood, not Hollywood, but audience dumbing down argument is simply because that's playing into the exact kind of cynicism that it's intended to criticize. You cannot fight cynicism with cynicism. And
that's why I want to avoid that. I don't think it's the fact that audiences are stupid. I mean, obviously you're going to run into stupid people or lazy people or overly pushy people anywhere you go. I do think it is an expectation shift from audiences through different storytelling practices, and as it's evolved over really since the late 80s, early 90s, when it really kind of started to take hold. And I do see it kind of coinciding with social media and aggregate review sites and things like that, where you can have a very small group of extremely vocal people push the larger community in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of view that as a manifestation of that sort of amateur armchair critic mentality, and also overly praised but not quite so talented creators. And they've kind of gone hand in hand and sort of forming this environment that has let this type of thing become much more of an issue that really shouldn't be talked about, but yet here we are.
I would say if there's anything that has really contributed to the issue, it's the rise of places like TV tropes. And what I have referred to in the past as buzzword criticism. Like how many times there have been plenty of times where I've seen someone use the presence of this or that trope, even if they don't refer to that, or the presence of even a genre, to dismiss a work. We talked about that not too long ago when it came to Geek Native having shit taste in it, having shit arguments for anime regarding his take on how not to summon a demon lord.
We also had that conversation on the revisiting Power/Rangers GeekWatch episode about how people think that, you know, the tropes in the actual Power Rangers shows are bad because they're aimed at children or whatever, and that's why they want their nitty gritty reboots.
And as someone who survived the '90s comic book era, I'd rather not go back.
Yeah, let's not say we did.
Yeah, we don't need mullet Superman anymore. Thank you.
No.
I don't need mullet Superman, although I would pay good money for an anime studio to like say Madhouse or something to get a crack at Spawn for a few weeks.
Anyway, guys, I'm gonna head out. I'm starting to doze off over here.
No worries,
All
man.
right.
Stay
Same.
frosty.
Have a good night.
Good night.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm dozing too, guys.
No worries. Thanks for coming in, Lady K, and doors always open. And your mic. It sounded like she said something, but Mike screwed up. So, Discord problems all around. Gotta love them.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
But there is one big one that I've been saving when it comes to cardinal sins, and that is the Shyamalan effect.
No.
I can see why you would save that one for last.
Yeah.
Capstone, if I've ever heard it. Can we just end it now and not and say we didn't and say we did it, please?
First
I don't want to
off,
explore this.
no, because you had to bring up Capstone and thus remind me of Tech War. So fuck you.
That's twice in the same episode. I told her I could do it.
Well, I'm glad I saved at least one good beer for this.
I still have most of a bottle of whiskey left, Doku. I'm set.
And that deals with twists. Many times we have seen certain authors and certain creators trying to apply some sort of twist, whether it be the twist endings that Shyamalan was infamous for, or the twist villain that Disney seems to have a hard-on for in the last decade.
Or the corollary to the twists, the quote, subversion of expectations.
Fuck you.
Hey, remember, I'm only subverting expectations by making Game of Thrones end the way it did.
Congratulations, you've reached the trifecta, you prick.
I'm really, really glad I saved a beer for this.
God, you're going to be the reason I go bald early.
Aren't you already?
No.
Oh man, I thought I was ahead of the game.
But okay, now let's be fair when it comes to Shyamalan. The twist with Sixth Sense was the rare case where this kind of thing actually worked.
Yeah, worked really well, in fact.
I would say the two prime examples to me of how to do a twist properly is, well, for starters, half of the stuff that Rod Serling would do. but that's a little too easy. Second is Memento.
That was a really interesting movie too.
And third is Fight Club. Now,
yeah, but that twist, if you had read the book before you had seen the movie, was already known to you.
That's technically true, but at the same time, I can't go with that simply because my policy is unless I absolutely have to, I divorce a book from a movie.
I can understand that, but the same twist exists in both. That's why I bring it up.
And you know, the whole every movie is someone's first kind of thing, just like every book is someone's first.
Yeah.
And the reason why it works in these cases is that once it's revealed, everything up until that point starts to fall into place, and you realize that it was always in front of you. You just weren't seeing it because of how you were interpreting the information that was presented.
Yeah, the foreshadowing was there. There was just one context clue that you didn't have because it would have killed the mystery in the first place.
Mm-hmm. But the thing is, the reason why Chekhov's gun is used so often in Lexicon is the fact that if you have the setup, you have to have a payoff that follows through, even if that payoff is blindingly obvious. I see this a lot in wrestling, where yes, the payoff is obvious, but if you try and go with something else to try and swerve, all you end up getting is a pissed off audience in the process. There are some times where you can do the subversion, but even those subversions are built upon something. I know everybody likes to bring up the whole Hogan is the third man kind of thing, but that sort of thing was teased and poked around with for a few years even before that point.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it had happened one week where he's red and yellow, and then the next week he's in the black, then you'd have a point. But that wasn't the case in that instance, because the people who do this smartly know that people don't just turn villainous at because someone flipped a switch. No, villainy is a gradual thing.
Just as heroism is a gradual thing.
Mm-hmm.
Heel face turns and face heel turns are both best if done over the course of a story.
Yes. And when it comes to a bad twist, it's when the information that's revealed is supposed to be accepted as the truth, even when the things leading up to it contradict that supposed proclamation.
I'm trying to think of a good example of that, but there are so many.
Well, let's go with a low-hanging fruit in this case. Mass Effect 3.
I hate you.
Turnabout is fair play, bitch. Going from up until for the large majority of that game, the theme was war is hell, and no matter what, you're not going to be able to save everyone.
Yep.
And
you need to gather enough people to at least save the people you can.
Yes. And right at the end, it's all of a sudden back to a story that you thought you resolved when dealing with the problem with Tali. That is synthetics versus organics.
Yep.
And not only having to deal with it at the end, but after dealing with effectively a chamber play between yourself, the Elusive Man, and Anderson.
Yep.
With the two of them basically acting as the shoulder devil and angel, and you as the intermediary.
Something I would like to note with the addition of the free DLC that was supposed to give longer endings and everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one correct choice coming from Shepard's character. Paragon Control. Because Shepard throughout all three games has always been about choice and giving choice to the races while still trying to save everybody. And in all other situations, choice is removed from people. Whether it's destroy, synthesis, or renegade control, choice is removed, and that's not something Shepard, whether they're Paragon or Renegade, would do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Paragon Control, Shepard sacrifices only themselves, so it's a choice they made for themselves to replicate their personality into all of the Reapers and help the entire galaxy ascend and rebuild from the war and give them all the knowledge of the previous cycles at the same time. That is exactly something Shepard, as we have seen them portrayed on all pathways you can possibly take in the previous 2 games and the 3rd game leading up to that point, would end in.
Mm-hmm.
So while they give you choices of endings, none of the other choices make sense in context.
Yeah. Another good example I can think of a twist not working, even though apparently so many people swear by this movie, is The Usual Suspects.
I like it as a movie, but you're right, the twist doesn't work.
Because now there's a few reasons why it doesn't work. The first is how they build up Kaiser Soze, comparing implying that he is the devil.
Yep.
Even so, calling him the Prince of Darkness and all that. But here's the thing: when you imply that a character may or may not be the devil, for all intents and purposes, he is. No matter if you call him Mephisto or Chernobog, as far as the audience is going to be concerned, he's the devil. And I have to bring that up because I have an entire bookshelf dedicated to the grudges inflicted by Joe Quesada. No, I'm not getting. I will never get over One More Day.
I'll get there eventually.
But the other major problem with that particular twist is when it's revealed that Kaiser Soze and Verbal are basically one and the same. It puts everything that he's said under dispute, trying to do the whole unreliable narrator thing.
Yeah.
But this was the wrong way to do it, because effectively it undoes all the characterization you had up to that point. Because you have no means to trust anything he said about anybody at that point. If you want a better example of this whole unreliable narrator kind of thing, I'd actually go with Hero.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Because in that case, you effectively have a chamber play with Hero. And for the record, I love that movie to death, even if there is one slight change in the translation for the English release. Namely the 2 words that Broken Sword wrote.
Yeah.
Although something else that puts it in his favor, it actually got a graphic novel adaptation by Wing Xing Ma, the same guy behind the Storm Riders.
Yeah.
Which does change the ending a little bit, but I didn't mind the change. All that it did was just have Nameless survive after the fact. But in that particular case, you have effectively a chamber play between Nameless and the King of Keen. Nameless is telling his particular story, and the King is acting as a critic, pointing out the holes in his story.
Yeah.
And then you have his multiple attempts at the story, each of which reveals more and more of the truth, and the plan that he ultimately concocted. And because of that, it shifts the context of the film from a heroic assassin trying to take down a villainous king to whether or not this king is actually villainous, or if he's someone who should make his attempts to unify the country. Hence, go ahead.
I was going to say, it is a good twist.
Mm-hmm. And the whole... Now, I've seen some people say that the twist of the film is that Nameless is from Xiao. That's not really much of a twist.
Yeah, that doesn't change too much of anything in a shocking way. It wouldn't be surprising that he's from someplace else that was under attack from the king's forces, which is why he concocted the plan in the first place.
Especially since, well, this is a man with no name.
Yep.
Obviously the most famous kind of twist for a lot of people is the whole revelation with Vader. I don't consider that, now that I have the full context of things, to be a particular good example of a twist, comparatively speaking, because it was a way for Lucas to get out of the corner that he had wrote himself in. As much as Lucas claims that was always the plan from the beginning, that's not true. Both the whole thing with Vader and the whole thing with Luke and Leia being siblings was a case of him trying to get out of the fact that he wrote himself into a corner. The first being the corner he wrote himself in regarding Luke's father and whether or not he should be adding another character when he already had a very packed amount of characters to begin with. Whereas,
yeah,
and the same thing applied in that. And the funny thing is, Mark Hamill called him out on the fact that he was basically pulling that reveal out of his ass.
Mm-hmm.
And even funnier is the fact that the Star Wars TCG had roasted him with 2 cards called "This is just wrong" and "This is still wrong." But the thing is that Lucas has outright admitted many times that he is not a very good writer. He's very much an ideas person, but even back at his peak, he wasn't a writer kind of person.
And he also realized this after looking at the prequel series.
Well, I think you can really look at this if you look at the original script for the Star Wars, which was adapted into a comic and is completely incomprehensible.
I know.
It's very much a mess, and like with a lot of creators, he was only able to pull out of it because he had people who were able to yank the proverbial leash. There's a certain romanticism that we have culturally about the sole creative vision. But the truth of the matter is, even with those sole creative visions, they had people to bounce off of.
Writing teams are good. Remember that, people. Or at least in most cases, writing teams are good.
As long as you have a writing team that actually is doing the job and not giving each other backpats.
You mean like with the prequel trilogy?
Yes. Even beyond just the prequel trilogy, that particular backpat problem was present in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it was starting to get bad, but it hadn't gotten as bad as anything we saw in the prequels.
It's a case of the first warning sign.
Yes, canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it's also the reason why BioWare's writing decided to go downhill, although they had other reasons as well, namely the Antichrist known as EA. But when it comes to doing some sort of twist, this ties back into what I said before about the importance of a series Bible. You need to have that kind of thing because you need to understand rules before you bend or break them, especially with some sort of twist reveal. The value of a twist reveal is one that is playing on expectations. You are playing on how people will perceive things. Um, and I know I've been ragging on The Legend of Korra because of its particular writing sins, but I will give the devil its due on one particular aspect, and that was Tarlok. Up until that point, it would be very easy to assume that Tarlok was Amon because of the way he acted around basically everybody, who being a complete weasel, and someone who could be seen as a person who would be willing to play both sides of a particular debate.
Yeah.
And of course, when it's revealed that that isn't the case and that he's Amon's brother, that was, I'm not going to say it was a good twist, but it was one that definitely fit when it came to diverting attention. Actually, the best way to put it is that was an effective red herring that everybody was going to follow simply because Tarlok was so unlikable.
One thing, right? They wrote a character that you loved to hate.
Mm-hmm. That's the reason why if you want to do a good twist, you have to be willing to play with what people are going to assume and what people are going to expect. And I'd say that's the reason why a lot of the Woken Dead can't do it, because in order to do that, you have to understand people.
And that's why their idea of subverting expectations is just to break everything at all.
The problem is, even when you break, you still have to try and pick up the pieces. This is why you have the whole ebb and flow approach, where after you break through the proverbial wall, you have to set things up to build momentum for the next wall you're going to break through.
Yep.
And speaking of that, if I'd say another example of someone doing a twist right, Madoka.
Oh God, yes.
I was actually thinking of Madoka Magica when we very first got on this topic.
Because the whole notion that magical girls and witches are one and the same fits perfectly within everything that you had seen, and there are already hints of the similarities leading up to that point, especially with wishes. I'd say the real case where it started to become blatant, where it started to become less and less obvious, was Charlotte's Labyrinth.
On the good part about Madoka and why the twist works so well isn't inherently because of the twist itself, but as you go through the series, it does subverting expectations correctly. So when you do finally get to the twist, it's not the biggest twist in the world, but it fits in perfectly with that expectation that you have going in versus what you're finally left with at the very ending. Like, you come to think, magical girls are these, tropish saviors, only to have that completely subverted from you to thinking, okay, maybe there's no other way, only to have that completely subverted to you by the end of the fucking show when you finally get the twist.
Yeah.
It's very masterfully done, but that's something you can't expect a lot of people to do because things like that are lightning in a bottle.
There's a sentence I want to say.
Then why aren't you?
Kyubey did nothing wrong.
Bait.
When you think about it from Kyubey's perspective, though, he didn't.
Well,
like from our perspective, yeah, it's fucked up. From his perspective, he's.
If you think about it from the perspective of the combined universe, specifically the show, and the two movies that matter, Kyubey did nothing wrong.
For all intents and purposes, he was just somebody doing his job.
Exactly.
That's the thing. That's why I.
That's why I don't. That's why I don't agree with the idea that Kyubey is evil.
He's an antagonistic force, but that doesn't make him evil.
At worst, he is extremely amoral.
He's just there to maintain the balance.
And also, you have to keep in mind, Cube only grants them the powers to be magical girls once they accept it. It's completely up to them. Like, he's just offering them the ability to protect whatever it is they so desire, or gain whatever power they so desire, as long as it's for the achievement of the greater good. Cube is more a force of nature than anything else.
That's why I say he's an antagonistic force.
Mm-hmm.
But I just had to say that sentence because I know anybody else watching this that like Madoka is likely now raging at me. I savor your tears, people.
That's why I like characters like Cube, and I feel like forces of nature being used as characters in actual stories are very underrated and not utilized frequently, but I should say not utilized well frequently enough.
They're not utilized effectively at enough points. Anyway, Rails.
Yes.
Yeah. But I wanted to cap off on that one because throughout all of these, we've talked about cases of good writing and bad writing, and the point is that these particular traps, some of them are easier to avoid than others, but they can be avoided. And the easiest way to make sure to have yourself protected against these sort of traps is to possess a degree of humility. To
never assume that you can't make the same mistake.
Not that you also the reason why I like Vincent Flanders' work is because his whole thing is showing what not to do by demonstrating examples of people doing it. You know, the best way to avoid pitfalls is to watch other people fall in them.
Yeah, but not everybody is smart enough not to put their hand on the stove when they see somebody else burn their hand.
Some people have. I like to describe it as some people going into the fridge, grabbing a glass of milk, and going, "No, this milk is sour. Maybe tomorrow it'll be fresh." But it can be done. It's been done plenty of times, and even though there are clearly cases of lightning in a bottle, if you do you will always put yourself at an advantage if you do three things: research, research, research. Don't just read your own work. Read other people's works. Read what other people have to say about their work. Read what other people have to say about other people's work.
Yeah.
Both the good stuff and the bad stuff. This is why I wholeheartedly approve of watching objectively bad movies just so you can see what you can learn from it. But that is where I'm going to leave it off for this particular episode of GeekWatch. I'm going to be having a busy week throughout this week. So tomorrow I have Eternum Gaming, and to talk about the game that they've developed called Eternity. Tuesday, our favorite mech brother, James Streisand, will be visiting the temple to talk about his upcoming comic, Eyes of the Forest. Wednesday, the man of a thousand voices, Spike Spencer, will be coming back. So I'll have an opportunity to talk with him about what he's got planned, and possibly to hear both of us whine about Australian grills again. Thursday, the developer of Rainwall will be coming on. Friday, the dev of a Renaissance-style dark fantasy game, Streets of Peril, will be coming on. And Saturday, the guy behind T Crusading will be coming on to talk about his Zelda RPG that he's working on called Heroes of Hyrule. And Sunday, if all goes as planned, I'll be having Nord Games on. And of course, the return of GeekWatch. But that is a story for another day. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.